Hey guys, and welcome back to a new video. In this video, I will give you a very comprehensive guide on theming in Compose Multiplatform. So specifically what we'll do is we will take a look at these realistic mockups here for a login screen. And then I show you how I would take those existing mockups and transform these into a real CMP Compose Multiplatform theme with regards to colors. So a material theme that would consider this theme here for this app specifically, but also how a dark theme variant would look like and would be implemented, as well as text styles. So you will learn how you can define consistent text styles with a custom font to have different fonts. As you can see here, this heading font here is a different one than the description, and how you can then easily reference these styles across the app. To get started, make sure to generate a new Compose Multiplatform project here on the kmp.jetbrains.com website. That is currently the best way to actually generate a new Compose Multiplatform project, but it will soon be replaced with an inbuilt wizard here inside of Android Studio. So if you're watching this sometime in the future, then chances are that you can actually already generate the project directly from your IDE. But make sure to enter project name and your package name, tick all these three boxes, so desktop, iOS, and Android, and we can exclude test cases since that is not the focus of this video. And then you simply click download, extract the zip file, and then open the extracted folder in Android Studio. And this is then how things will look like inside of Android Studio. So this is a completely blank build. And as I mentioned, we will now set up our Material theme here, because Material3 is in fact the default theming framework, the default design system that Compose Multiplatform apps stick to. It's similar to how themes were defined on the native Android side, but not identical, which is why this definitely deserves a separate video. But let's first of all dive into this app.kt file here in Compose app common main app.kt, because that is the primary entry point for our app, at least in the common part of our code. And here we can already see all our composables that are default generated here in this first project. They are all being placed in a Material theme composable. However, this default Material theme composable really does not define our own theme, of course. So as I mentioned, we have these Figma files here, which, by the way, come from the current app challenge in my mobile dev campus. So in case you're actually interested in learning to build such full apps here, always being able to ask your questions, having access to me and my team to help you with your questions, and of course, getting these regular professional design mockups, then check out the mobile dev campus. I will include a link in this video's description. And if you actually watch this video till the end, then I will also share a discount code with you, so you can really try this out for not a lot of money. All right, but what are really the first steps here when you get such Figma mockups from a client, from your company, whatever, and you now want to take these and transform these into a consistent Material theme that you can always reference in your project? Well, ideally, the designer already considered that you are using, or that you're building an Android or a CMP app that is based on Material design, because ideally, they already reference these theme styles here for you inside of the Figma mockups. If you don't yet have a design and you just plan to maybe let them design an app for you at some point, then that is definitely something that I would tell them to make the colors here stick to Material theme. So in Material3 design, we have those typical color names here. So surface, on-surface variant. We have error colors, we have primary colors, secondary colors, tertiary colors, and so on. But there are a lot of these predefined color tokens that make a lot of sense to already consider here in Figma, because otherwise it will become a bit more of a pain later when you implement this and the designs aren't sticking to these requirements. Same thing actually for text styles, so that we have consistent different types of texts in our app. Here, these are already specified in the designs itself. So we have title text files in extra large, large, and small in this case. They reference the font that should be used for each corresponding style. They reference the font weight and the size and line height that should be used for this specific variant. So you can see all the title fonts in this project should stick to the Space Grotesque font, and all the body fonts, so the smaller ones, stick to the Inter font. But here we also have these distinctions between large, medium, and small, with the different font weights, different sizes, and line heights. But the first thing that I typically always do is I start with the colors. And here in this case, since this bigger app, you can see it's called Notemark, so it will be some sort of note-taking app, but that's something we don't yet release, because we release these apps here in 4 milestones, and this login registration functionality is just the first milestone. So people can work on these in smaller chunks. That is why there aren't that many colors yet, but if you have a real production app, it's very likely that your scheme and brand colors here are quite larger than you see here. But in the end, you just need to reference those color hex codes here and simply create color definitions inside of your Compose Multiplatform code. So for example, taking this on-surface color, we would copy this hex code, then jump into Android Studio, and here in our root package in the common main module, we want to create a new package, which I call theme. And here we really put all the theme-related files. For colors, I really just want to have a top-level colors file in which we place all our color definitions. So here we would then define our on-surface color. That is the one that comes from Figma. We make this a color here from Compose UI Graphics. And then in here, to really reference this hex string, we need to prepend 0xFF. So it's a hexadecimal representation here. And then we paste our color code from Figma. And this is really something you now need to do for each and every color, at least each and every color that is used for what you want to build. Here in this case, I don't think we need all of them because we're really just building the login screen UI here, but you can see there's also this entry screen and there are different variants. By the way, if you also want to learn responsive design, I will make a separate YouTube video about that where we'll really also build the responsiveness here in CMP for the login screen, so landscape mode, tablet mode, and so on. But I will just reference all the colors that are needed for the login screen, of course. Since I've already prepared these, well, I can just replace my definitions here with the predefined colors that we need here for this video, but it's really always the same. You just specify each and every color that you need in your app and then paste the corresponding color code here after the double F. In this particular case, this app does not come with a dark theme, so it's really just a pure light theme app. But if you have a dark theme variant, then you would also have Figma mockups where specific other dark theme colors would be specified. So then you would simply have this color block here twice, or maybe just some colors twice that would actually differ between different themes. And then in a moment, I will show you how you can make sure to reference the right color for the right theme. In order to define the actual theme, so that comes next, where we say, hey, for light theme, we want to use these sets of colors. For dark theme, we want to use these ones. We want to jump into our theme package again, create a new Kotlin file, which we call theme. Let's actually call it node mark theme, since that's typically a convention here that we just use our app name and then append theme there. We create this file and then we can start off with our light color theme. So we want to have a val light color and we can set this equal to a light color scheme. So that is already coming here from Material3. And here in this light color scheme, you can see we have all those different color tokens. That is how these are called. So just different colors for different purposes. So the primary color is typically just the most prominent color, very often just your brand color, which in this case would probably be here, this bluish color for very prominent actions, like this link or this button, for floating action buttons. These kinds of components are for the primary color. You also have other options here, like a primary container, if you have the primary color that serves as a background. With secondary, we have a surface. So for example, for dialogues, for modals that are shown on top of some kind of background color. We have normal background colors, of course. So depending on what kind of purpose a specific color has, whether it should be shown for background, for a surface, for some kind of primary action, you need to assign these different colors for the right color tokens. And ideally, that is also already considered in your designs. So here we have all our different colors that could be used in some kind of combination for the different color tokens. And here we now need to say, hey, our primary color, when we reference that for a theme, that should reference our primary color from our colors file. Same thing, for example, for our surface color, that should reference our surface color from our colors file. We have surface container low, or lowest actually, which would be surface lowest, since those were also referenced in our Figma designs. We have a background color, which would be background. What else do we have here? On surface and on surface variant. So let's specify these as well. On surface variant. And this is now also how we can actually define a different theme. So for a dark theme, since in that case, we would simply copy paste, have the same code here, just call it dark color theme. Make this not a light color scheme, but a dark color scheme. And now you can say, okay, if you reference the primary color token somewhere in your app for example, for such a button here, that you have this bluish color, which should only be this particular blue on light theme, but maybe a different tone of blue for the dark theme, then you can say in your code where you specify the color for this button, you reference the color token. So you say, hey, this background color here is material theme color scheme dot primary. So you don't reference those hard-coded colors, which would always be static independent of the theme, but you would rather say, hey, I just want to reference the primary color. And then depending on whether the device is actually in dark or in light theme, it would use the color referenced for light theme here. And if you're in dark theme, you could specify a completely different color. So you could say primary dark. And you could say, hey, I actually have a primary dark color, which is now maybe a completely different tone of blue, maybe a lighter one, so it's better visible on a dark background, for example. So that is how a light and dark theme works in Compose Multiplatform. Now, in our case, as I mentioned, we just have the light theme, but I think you got the idea how this would work. So we can remove the dark color theme here since we don't have that. Now, the next step is we actually want to define our own little composable wrapper here, which I call node mark theme. And this is simply the wrapper in which we put all of our entire UI tree. And this wrapper will make sure that this theme is really applied to our entire app. So in here, we really just need to pass our content, which is a composable lambda like this. And in here, we then use this material theme function, which is already placed here in our app by default, but it does not specify custom themes. So it uses the default color scheme here. It uses default shapes, default typography, and so on. We want to change that, of course. So we say we have a material theme. We, of course, forward our content. So the actual composable lambda. We also need to make this a composable function. And we can then say our colors, color scheme is actually equal to our light color theme. And then our light color theme will be used across the app. If you have a dark theme as well, then you need to dynamically assign this color scheme. So then you would say, hey, val theme is equal to if is system in dark theme. That is how we can check this. Then you would use your dark color theme, and otherwise you would use your light color theme. And then you would reference this theme variable here instead. And it would dynamically adjust the moment the user switches the theme. And what you can also do if you're building a pure Material3 app, also with the Material3 components and not your own custom UI, you can stick to dynamic colors. So then the theme will adjust based on the user's background. So it's all a consistent color theme based on what the user has set for their background. So if they have maybe some kind of sea background that is mostly blue, then your app will also adjust to that bluish color. However, I think that is something that is only applicable on the Android side of things. And I don't think this works on iOS and desktop. And now, if we jump into our app.kt file here, this material theme we now want to replace with our custom node mark theme. And we can now perfectly test this by referencing, for example, the background color, which is, I think, a bluish color, because the background color here is actually what's behind this sheet. So this bluish color here. So if we go to our app and we say this column, we now want to give this background color, then we would reference a background modifier and we say, hey, material theme, this object here, that color scheme, that background. So that is how we reference these color tokens. And if you have a dark theme, it will use the dark theme variant here. And if you have a light theme and that is also turned on, it will reference the light theme variant. So if we run this on our device, and I also open the running devices block, then you can see it is currently padded a little bit awkward because of this save content padding here. But if we remove this, then you can see it fills the entire screen. You would need to handle window insets here in this case, ideally with a scaffold. But you can see the background color here is definitely referenced. And just in case we would now have a dark theme to show you how this would look like, we say val dark colors is equal to dark color scheme. And let's just change the primary color here, primary to something like primary dark. Need to change this to something primary dark. I don't know, whatever this will result in here. I'll just change this to something else. And then we dynamically reference these colors here. So if we are in dark theme, we say the dark colors, and otherwise the light colors. And if we then relaunch this, there we go. This is now light theme. And if we switch to dark theme here in our options, where is that? Here, dark theme, if we turn this on, then you can see this is a very different color, but it's definitely the dark color that is applied here. However, if we remove this and we just reference our light colors and you relaunch your app, then you can see that our tool or status bar icons here are actually dark. And this is not always that well visible because our Android app thinks that we are here in light theme. So there is very likely a light background for our status bar. So it better shows these icons here with a high contrast, so in dark. However, sometimes you actually want to swap these icons to also show these as light icons, even in the light theme. You can change this, since this is only an Android specific thing. You can change this in Android main, therefore, going to Kotlin, main activity, and here where it says enable edge to edge, you would say, okay, the status bar style in this case is equal to system bar style dot dark. So you make it behave as if it was in dark theme. And if you then relaunch this, even though I'm still in light theme, then you can see the icons turn white. But again, this is only something you should change if you only have a single theme. And these icons also look bad on that theme. Okay, so much about the colors. The next part of our theme that we definitely want to implement here are fonts. So the different fonts that we may want to use in our app. So as I already showed you, here we have two different fonts that we are using. On the one hand, this heading font called Space Grotesque and this normal body font, which is called Inter. And for these fonts, the designers here actually referenced text styles. That is something I've also already shown you. We have title fonts, so using this Space Grotesque variant, and we have body fonts referencing this Inter font. First of all, we of course have to somehow tell Android Studio how these fonts actually look like. And that's something we can get from Google Chrome by, just, for example, going to Google Fonts. Ideally, your font is available there. And you then simply search for the font that is referenced in your design. So here, Space Grotesque, you say get font. And then you would also search for another font. Going back here, in this case, it's Inter. So if you say, hey, we also want the Inter font, you say get font. And then in your kind of shopping cart or what that is, you would simply download all these fonts. You get these as zip files, as specifically as TTF files. And these TTF files we now need to include in Android Studio. So here in project, these are actually Compose resources, so external resources that we need to add here. So I want to open this, and the default is that there's already a drawable, so an image. But since we want fonts here, we want to create a new directory here under Compose resources called font. And be specific with that name, since that is what Compose Multiplatform will look for when looking for your fonts. And then for the three different font variants that we reference here, I will simply paste these like this. You can see I have Inter Medium, Inter Regular, and the Space Grotesque bold font. And if we double click on these, you can see that's really the font that we've downloaded here, the bold variant for that. And now we need to create reusable styles for these fonts. So we don't always need to hard code these styles across our code base, because very likely we have different specific title font styles that we want to reference for all the titles in our app. And we have specific body font styles that we want to reference for all the bodies. We have specific button font styles, for example, that we want to reference for all buttons in our app. And for that, in theme, we want to create a new typography file in which we first of all define our font families. So a font family is in the end just a single font, so either Space Grotesque or Inter, but it combines all the different font weights for that font family. So in our case, we would have two font families. On the one hand, Inter, combining the regular and medium style, and with the Space Grotesque font having just the bold style. So we would say we have a val Space Grotesque here, which is a font family. And here we need to create fonts, which we can now reference here from our resources. And actually, I think I imported the wrong font. Let's retype this. We want to import this variant here that takes a resource. So not a res ID, but a resource. And then we can reference these resources from res. That is how we reference resources from our Compose resources directory in Compose Multiplatform. We're going to reference fonts. And then we say, hey, Space Grotesque bold. That is the font we want to use here. We then also need to say which specific weight this font has. So in our case, it's bold. So we would say font weight .bold. And you'll notice that we get an issue here because font is in fact a composable. On the native Android side, maybe you have worked with that before, we don't need to make this context here composable. So the font there is actually not a composable function, but here on Compose Multiplatform it is, which I assume is because it needs to work with all the different platforms. So what we can do here is we can make this a getter, and we annotate this getter with composable. So we can only reference this font family here inside of a composable context. And the same thing we now want to do for our Inter font. So we copy paste this, we call it Inter, and here we don't reference our Space Grotesque font, of course, but our Inter Regular. We say the font weight here. Here it's not called regular, but actually normal. And then here, since we have two variants, regular and medium, we also want to have another one for the medium style font. And here we say the font size, font weight is medium. So now we have our two font families that are used across the app. But what we don't yet have are reusable text styles. So text style is always what you apply to a specific text here. There is always a default text applied, but if you have a text composable somewhere, then you can always say style is equal to a text style. And the text style here has tons of attributes how you could change specific texts. But since we don't always want to set all these values here and assign the right font family, assign the right text size for these reusable styles, for our titles, for our body fonts, and so on, we want to define this in our theme. So here in this typography file, down below, we'll also have a typography, which now defines these text styles. And we say, hey, typography from Material3. And that is also a composable getter, where we now say, okay, actually we don't need to return curly braces here, but just a typography object here from Material3, in which we can define technically all those different text styles that Material3 comes with. In our case, of course, just those that we need in our app. So those that are referenced here, title and body, so extra large, large, small, and body large, medium, and small. And in our case, the extra large style isn't actually needed because we're just building the login screen. And the login screen here, that is the biggest style that is referenced. If we take a look here, it references the title large style. If we take a look at this one here, for example, it's the body large style. So that is how you can find out in Figma which component references which style. So let's start with body large. And here we can say, hey, that is a text style. And first of all, very importantly, we need to define the font family, which for the body style should be our inter font. So we can reference this here. And other than that, we really just need to take a look at our mockups and what the designers already gave us. Say, okay, body large should stick to the inter font. That is what we've defined. Should have the regular font weight, should have a size of 17 and a line height of 24. So we go back. Font weight is font weight.normal. We say the font size is 17 SP. And the line height is, I think it was 24 SP. And here it's important to say that SP in mobile development, so scale independent pixels, that is not identical to the pixels used in Figma. So here in Figma, if we take a look, the size here is in pixels. However, mobile devices, and especially Android, but in Compose Multiplatform as well, reference scale independent pixels because there's also always a pixel density. So how many pixels you can fit into a specific area on the screen. And on mobile devices specifically, the user can also change the font size preference in the system settings. So if you have maybe an older audience and they say, I want a larger font size than default, they can change so in the system settings. And then if you reference SP units, your font size in your app will actually also adjust based on that system preference. And sadly, there is no perfect conversion formula how you get from Figma pixels to these SP values. I personally always just start off with a 1-to-1 conversion like here. So 17 pixels in Figma is 17 SP on mobile and on desktop here. But it has happened to me before that sometimes this looked a bit off, didn't look exactly like on the mockups. And then your best guess is really just playing around a little bit so you come up with values that really look like you want on different devices. For this particular style here, you will notice that on mobile devices, it will look great. If you run this on desktop, the font looks a little bit large for my taste, but that is something you have to then experiment with on your own if you reference such styles from Figma. So other than that, we would really just define our other styles. So we can copy paste this. We have body medium that is referenced in Figma. If we take a look here, body medium uses the medium weight and a size of 15 and line height of 20. So we say font weight medium, font size is, 15 and line height of 20. Then we have body small, which references font weight normal, and other than that, regular 15 SP size, so same settings as medium. So we would say, hey, 15 here, 20 there. The only difference is the font weight. And now the same thing we just want to do for the title font, for the title text style. So we paste this here. We have a title large, we have a title medium, and we have a title small, like this. For these title fonts, we of course now don't want to reference our inter font, but the space grotesque font. Copy, paste this here and here. And now taking a look at our mockups here, the large space grotesque font, actually we just need large and small here. The large one is bold, 32, 36. So we go back here, bold, 32, 36. And the small one, so the medium one is not needed here at this point. The small one uses a medium font weight and 1724. So here 1724 and medium font weight. That is really how we create our consistent typography for our entire app. And now we of course need to just take this and link it in our notemark theme here where we have our material theme. And we say, okay, our typography is equal to this typography we have created. And if we then, let's quickly just add this save content padding here as well. Oh, save content padding. So we can interact with the sample UI again. If we relaunch this and we click this button, then you can at least notice that this text here is definitely a different font than the text here on this button. Why is that? Well, because these existing Material3 components like this button, they reference specific styles from your material theme. So specific body large, body medium or so. And there may be styles that we have not provided a consistent style for here. So I think buttons reference the label style. I'm not entirely sure, but I think they do reference the label style. And since for the label style, so label small, we did not explicitly provide a text style here that references this font size that we want to use. That is why our button font still use the default font, which in this case is, I think, Roboto. However, we can of course pass our own style or define all styles here in our typography. So if we go here to our button and we reference the style now here and we say, hey, that is material theme typography now, not color scheme anymore, but typography. And we say, for example, that is title small. If we do this, then you can see our button text is definitely adjusted to our space grotesque font. If we say that is body medium, for example, then you can see it adjusted to our inter font and definitely looks differently than this. So long story short, if you define all styles that you can define here in this typography, so you assign a text style for all these parameters in a clear font family, then all those default Material3 components will also automatically stick to these styles. If you don't reference these all, you sometimes need to manually assign these text styles like we had here. And that's really most of what you need to know about theming. You will notice here that there's also a third thing we can pass, and that is shapes. So sometimes you have different shapes you want to define in your app. I personally don't use this too often. So if you really have very consistent shapes and you have a set of 4 or 5 shapes that you always use across the app, then it can make sense to reference these. So you could simply create a shapes object here, say, hey, that's equal to shapes, and then you can define an extra small shape, for example, a rounded corner shape where you say that small shape has 5 dp of corner radius. Then you have, what else is here? A small one, or let's define a medium one, for example, with a bit more roundings of 15 dp. And then you can reference those shapes here. Shapes is equal to shapes. And you can then also reference these shapes across the app. So here, for example, you would go ahead and say you clip this to material theme shapes medium, for example. And then if we relaunch this, you'll notice that we apply our medium shape here. If we change this to extra small, extra large, that's predefined, but extra small, then you can see we have smaller radius, and that is the one that is used here is simply what we've defined here in the shapes object. This, if you ask me, as I said, is optional. I also see people just defining these shapes in the app. In my experience, it has happened quite rarely that these shape definitions in existing designs change, at least across the app, sometimes really just for a single component. You can definitely stick to that. That is, I would just suggest you to try this out. And if you're fine with always referencing these material shapes, then do so. And maybe one last little tip here. Sometimes it can happen that you don't have a clear, that you have some kind of extra color at least, that you can't clearly assign to one of these colors that you can reference here. So these color tokens that you can reference in your material theme. You can also create such custom colors that you reference in your app. That works, for example, by having a little composable helper function here, which you could call extended color or so, where you then specify on the one hand a light color and a dark color. and this then returns one clear color depending on the theme. So you could simply say you return, if you're in dark theme, the dark color, and otherwise the light color. And then if you say you want to extend your theme now, you would simply go ahead and you would extend this color scheme declaration here with your, I don't know, let's call it extra color, which returns a color and which returns a color in form of a composable getter is equal to composable, composable, and then you say that's equal to extended color. And this one can be removed here, yeah, sorry. Extended color, you specify your light color, which would be, I don't know, for example, like this. You define your dark color, which is simply, I don't know, that would be white and that would be black. But then you can simply reference this extra color here in your app. So you could say, instead of a background, you say you reference your extra color, and then it would also dynamically adjust based on the theme. So that is how I typically would adjust my material theme if you have such extra colors to reference. And you'll notice if we launch this and change the theme, it will really work exactly as before. So you can see dark color, and if we switch to our other theme in dark theme, it would be the light color. But that is how you set up such a solid theming approach in Compose Multiplatform. And as I said, if you don't just want to watch these videos and then forget everything afterwards again, but you really want to practice what you've learned, you want to talk about your learnings, you want to ask questions also to me and my team directly, and work on such apps here regularly where we provide API, where we provide Figma mockups, where we provide requirements, so we really simulate a real-world scenario as close as possible, then join the Mobile Dev Campus. As promised, I will give you a discount code that gives you 50% on your first month of the Pro plan. For that, simply enter the discount code theming50 in the second checkout step, and you can try this out for 1 month for very little money. And you, by the way, also get more than 30 hours of video courses and videos about Android and mobile development. So link is down below. Check it out. Scroll through the website a little bit and get an impression of what this is about. If you have questions about the campus, let me know these below the video. As I said, theming50 gives you 50% on the first month. And other than that, thanks so much for watching this video. I will see you back in the next one, in which we will build the responsive part of this UI. I'm not sure if in the next one or the one after that, but there will definitely be a separate video where I implement this responsive design here. So we have a separate landscape layout, separate tablet layout for foldable devices, all in Compose Multiplatform. So we really have this same UI and replicate this here as it is on the Figma mockups. Thanks so much. Have an amazing rest of your week. See you back in the next video. Bye-bye.